Peter Lynch is a fundamentalist. That is, he researches the very basics of a company, such as its earnings prospects and who its managers are, before deciding which stocks to buy. He does this with outstanding success. In a recent survey, the mutual fund he manages, Fidelity Magellan, rated as the best performing mutual fund of all over the last 10 years. Stan Weinstein, on the other hand, doesn't care if a company makes beans or bullets. He's a technician, what I call an elf, and he uses charts and graphs and other arcane indicators as his selection technique. His view, as he expresses it in his highly respected newsletter, The Professional Tape Reader, is that the tape tells all. Peter, let's start with you. How do you decide which stocks to buy?
Well, Lou, I try and find basically two types of companies. One would be a major company that's had earnings problems in an industry that's been depressed, and the earnings are about to turn up, and sometime in the future, I don't know, but perhaps in the next 6 months or the next year. Major moves in companies usually occur because there's a dramatic change in profits. The second type of company would be a small, successful company that grows to a major size company over a long period of time.
Do you ignore the kind of technical things that someone like Stan looks at? Are you not concerned with how popular a stock is, for example?
I look at some technical indicators. I want to know whether there's been a major brokerage report written on it. If there's been several brokerage reports written on it recently, that's of concern to me. And whether there's a lot of institutional ownership. If there's a lot of institutional ownership, I regard that as a negative. If there's very little, I regard that as a positive. Some people would regard that as technical analysis.
Many people believe that with you big institutional investors in the field, the individual doesn't have a chance. What's your feeling?
I think the individual investor has several edges. First of all, his edge would be he only has to convince himself. Perhaps he has to convince the husband or the wife, but he can do it on his own. Also, he doesn't have to buy 100 stocks. He only has to buy 3 or 5. So I think they work in a particular industry. That's what I think they should get an edge on. They're in the tire industry. They're in the rubber industry. They see a dramatic turn way before I do. Or they see a local company that's terrific. They find a local product. I've had many examples of that. They're years ahead of me, or professionals.
You said 3 to 5 stocks. Was that a number you picked out of a hat, or do you think that's a sensible number for a starting investor?
Well, I think at least 3 to 5. I think if you find several companies that you like, I've done this before, and you pick one, you'll always pick the wrong one. It's invariable. So you pick all 5, and something will work, and then you keep learning as time goes by. Because I've found there's almost no relationship with what a stock does in the first few months I've owned it. Some stocks have gone up, and I felt good about them, and they've been dogs. And some stocks have gone down, and the fundamentals got better, and I bought more of them. They were terrific. So I don't think you want to draw too much of a conclusion at the start of buying a stock, what it's going to do for you.
What do you think is the biggest mistake most investors make?
Well, I think that the single biggest mistake is they don't do research. People go to the library, and they do incredible research on a microwave oven, and then they'll go out and spend $10,000 on a stock because they heard a tip on the bus. I think the biggest mistake is they don't know what they own. And the other one is they buy on the potential of something. They hear a terrific potential story, but the profits aren't there. And I've found what you really want to do is when you start to hear this, you just have to black out. You have to think of a movie you went to recently, because the story is very appealing. You just have to get on to some other subject, because you have to tune in later on these things. I don't think you want to buy it on the potential of something. You want to buy it on the results.
Okay, you said they don't do the research. We're talking now to beginning investors. They must be thinking, how in the world can I do the research? What's your answer to that?
Well, first of all, they should know what we call, sort of a fun term in the business, the story. They should know what's underneath this company. Why do they own it? What are they looking for to happen? Then they can watch that unfold. Today, the annual reports are much better than they were 5 years ago. It explains companies' profits by division. So if somebody's trying to buy, they had a terrific fundamental story on plastics, and they bought General Electric for it, and it's 1% of General Electric, they've made a mistake. So they should know what they're looking for in a company. And as long as that's happening, they can call the treasurer, they can get on the mailing list, they can get the employee news. You'd be amazed who will answer the telephone when you own 100 shares of a stock.
Many people say that advisors always tell them how to buy a stock, they never tell them how to sell a stock. When do you decide to sell a stock?
What I try and do is I try and sell stocks because something else is more attractive. Stock A is simply more attractive than stock B. I don't try and find out the last quarter, the last eighth, the last 10 points. And my second rule, and this is the hardest one to follow, if I make a mistake, I try and sell it. If I'm looking for something to happen, some product to work, the business to get better, and it's clear that I'm wrong, this is the key thing. You really have to sell it. It's difficult to do, but you just want to just hope and pray, because you can wait for years to go on. And the third thing I think is what I call bottom fishing. A stock, Avon Products, goes from 150 to 90, on that basis alone, they buy the stock. And then, it can go to 18, as we know. A stock that's down, combined with a good fundamental story, is good. But just buying on that basis alone is very dangerous.
Stan? Obviously, the typical investor, as an individual, doesn't have the time to spend all the time you spend on all this. But is there anything he or she can learn from what you do?
I'm amazed that the average investor is out there in some industry. They're in the polyvinyl chloride industry, they're in insurance, they're in textiles, and they're going to see those industries turn. And they're not going to buy those stocks. They're going to go buy some stock from somebody in the National Guard, or they're going to do something on television on biogenetics. They have a big edge in me. I work awful hard, and they're months ahead of me. They can be in the healthcare industry. They're seeing new products. They should work on that they have in front of them.
As they used to tell writers, write what you know, you're telling them buy what you know.
Yes.
What would you tell them not to do? What do you think of the mistakes people make?
This is a common mistake I do. I think people buy stocks because they've fallen from price X to 2/3 of X or half of X. On that basis alone, they're buying a stock. That's called bottom fishing the stock market. Very, very difficult. I've had a rough go with it. Standard Oil Ohio this year fell from 90 to 60, and I told everybody, this stock is not going to go any lower. Then it went to 50, and I said, this is it, no lower. As it went through 40, I said to people, this is it. Finally, when it got down under 30 and people said, what do you think is Ohio? I said, what does Ohio do? I don't know that company. So, I absolutely backed away from it.
You didn't like to buy low.
Hey, John. It's Peter Lynch at Fidelity.
Peter Lynch is the most famous, maybe the best, stock picker in the country, the manager of the Magellan Growth Fund at Fidelity in Boston. Here's what they mean by growth. Lynch started out 13 years ago with $20 million in his fund. Today, it's $13 billion, 650 times bigger, and far the biggest mutual fund in the country. Last month, the Midas who made Magellan announced that he was quitting at age 45 to spend time with his wife and his 3 kids, to do some charitable work, to have some fun. He told us this morning he wasn't quitting because the business has changed, though in fact it has.
What bothers me, the thing that bothers me the most in my career I've been at Fidelity 21 years, I've really been in the stock market 25 or 26 years, has been the change from when I started out, you would buy a small company, you'd buy an option. The money eventually would help the company. Now it's turned to people buying, you would actually own part of the company if you wanted to speculate. Now people are buying options on whether General Motors are going to go up or down. That doesn't benefit General Motors. That's like betting whether BU is going to beat BC in a hockey game. None of the money gets to BU or BC. That's what the stock market has become. People are buying options on whether Sears is going to go up or down the next 3 months. I mean, that's a tragedy. It's really like betting on red or black at the casino. I mean, it's sad. And that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago.
Peter Lynch isn't getting out because the steady 8-year rise of the economy and the Dow Jones average may have peaked, though in fact he thinks it has. Do you look out over this horizon and see a recession spreading?
Well, clearly, Chris, the economy slowed down. I mean, every company I talk to since September has seen a slowdown. Now, the economy's gone, it's definitely shifted gears. I don't know whether it's gone from overdrive into low gear, into park, or into reverse, but it's definitely shifted gears. And I'd love to know whether 91 is going to be a recession or not. But, when Future Man comes to Boston, I'm always in Cleveland. I mean, I never know what's going to happen. We had the worst recession since the Depression in 1981-82. 20% prime rate, we had double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment. I don't remember anybody tell me about that. I never got any phone calls 2 years before that saying, we're going to have this incredible recession coming. I didn't read about that anywhere. So I think it's a waste to spend any time predicting the economy. When I talk to Sears and they tell me the carpet business stinks, that's economics to me. When I talk to General Motors and they say steel prices are going down, that's economics. When somebody tells me next year we're going to have a recession, that's weather forecasting. It's totally useless.
The thing that intrigues me most, Peter, if I may say, is the personal question here.
Sure.
I assume that you don't have plans to go to Mars or start your own company.
Right.
That you're leaving
Right.
for the reasons you say.
Right. I have absolutely I'm not going to run another fund. I'm not going to run pension money. I'm absolutely getting out of the money management business. I have no desire. I work for the best company in the country. I love the fund I'm doing. I just would like to do other things, and it doesn't work. You can't work a 75-hour work week together with a family. I've got a great wife and 3 kids. I'd like to spend a lot more time with them. And there's a lot of outside things I'd like to do.
I think most of us out there are really interested in what a guy in his 40s who's won the lottery wants to do with the rest of his life.
I really haven't planned this thing out. I just decided in the last 3 to 6 months that, it's too much for me. It's not working. I've been working every Saturday for 8 years. The last year and a half, I've been working Sunday mornings before I go to church. I think in the last year and a half, I've read 1 book. I used to read a book every 2 weeks.
That's what I want to know. I want to know the books you plan to read. I want to know the golf courses you dream of playing.
Okay. Well, James Michener is somebody, he's probably not the greatest writer of all time, but I enjoy him. I'm 3 books behind on James Michener. You're not doing any reading. I haven't read Texas, I haven't read Alaska, I haven't read Caribbean. You're really in tough shape. I don't know if he writes one every 2 years or not, but I'm 3 behind on him. I really don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing, but I'm sure it'll be in Boston.
People are rattled about the future of this community.
Yes.
What's your own view?
Well, I think that's way off base. Clearly, 1990 is going to be a tough year. 91 will probably be a little more difficult. But then 92, we start to have the Third Harbor Tunnel coming through, the Central Artery Project, the harbor cleanup. I think that could create 30, 40,000, good jobs for this, for the city, metropolitan Boston. And the construction problem, will probably be cleaned up by then. The real estate, will probably have bottomed. So I think this is, towns are cyclical just like stocks are cyclical. We've had 7 or 8 good years in Massachusetts, very strong, too strong. And now we're probably going to have 2 or 3 mediocre ones. But inherently, we have a very strong, network here, and I think we're going to do very, very well.
What will be the leading sector to succeed the mini-computers?
Well, I think clearly the education sector. I think this is the highest per capita student environment in the world. When you think of the amount of students, I think the numbers like in metropolitan Boston is 150,000 undergraduate and graduate students, which is a staggering number. That's not going down. That's going to grow. The healthcare function is still, one of the best, if not the best in the world. So we still have a very strong base. Tourism is still very strong. So the fact that we've had, downturn in the mini-computer industry, we felt a lot of that. Maybe there's more to be felt. The defense strength of this area is going to slow down somewhat. But, I think most of it's behind it. We've already had the downturn in real estate. The government has cut back. If you look at the state and local government, we've had a sharp contraction in the number of jobs. There may be more of that, but not a lot more. So we've already gone through a reduction in a lot of sectors. And I think they're going to bottom out in the next year or 2. So I don't think it's going to become anything like a Texas or an Oklahoma where, people are just going to leave in droves.
What's going to repopulate those buildings out on 128?
I think they may not be. That may take a long time. Those buildings aren't needed. Downtown Boston is in very fine shape. It's really the 128 belt. I have no guesses. I would not like to own one of those suckers. They built too many of those little fellas.
Those, in any event, are not the little fellas that Peter Lynch will be worrying about.
What I want to do is spend more time with my family. I like to watch some cartoons on Saturday morning, and fly a kite and go to the swings and take the kids to the shopping center. Nothing profound, just something just very prosaic, something I can enjoy. And the other things will take care of themselves.
And for some other thoughts on what to do till the financial doctor comes, let's go right over and meet tonight's special guest, Peter Lynch. Peter, welcome. Always a joy to have you.
Great to see you.
Please have a seat. When Peter Lynch first appeared as my guest on this program in 1982, his Fidelity Magellan Fund had about $350 million for him to invest. Today it has about $12.5 billion. Or considerably more than the entire gross national product of Guatemala. Well, you talk about a television program with an affluent audience. But while his 5 appearances here may not have hurt, much more to the point was that Mr. Lynch just kept on producing, making Fidelity Magellan not just the largest, but the single best-performing mutual fund of the entire decade, with a gain of more than 1,100%. Peter, what are you going to do for an encore in the 90s?
Well, I hope, I've said this earlier, my goal over a long period of time, not every year, would be to beat the market by 4 or 5%. I think that's a real fair objective. If I can do it, I'd be very happy. I think that would be an accomplishment for my shareholders.
You've told us over the years not to expect much from you, that your fund was getting too big, but
Right.
you keep on performing well. What are you doing differently? Why isn't everybody doing as well as you are?
Well, I think a lot of people spend so much time predicting the big picture, what the economy is going to do, what interest rates are going to do. I mean, Alan Greenspan heads the Federal Reserve. He doesn't know what's going to happen in interest rates. How the heck am I supposed to know what's going to happen in interest rates? So they spend too much time on that. I think if you look at 10 companies, you're going to find one that's interesting. If you look at 20, you'll find two. I mean, I looked at General Public Utilities after it doubled, and I got a triple out of it. I've looked at companies with unions. I've looked at companies that are in, very dead industries. So I think people have to be too focused. They'll just say, I only want to look at rapid growth fields. I think that's a big mistake.
What do you think of some of the other common mistakes small investors make?
Well, I mean, one thing they do is they don't understand what they own. And they also play the market. That single term, play the market, has done more damage. I think we've had this great 8-year bull market and people have lost money. It's obvious they got into the market, they bought options, they got out. You own a company. You don't own a lottery ticket. If the company does well, like Walmart or Limited, you can do very well. You don't have to buy it the first day. You could have bought Limited after it had 50 stores opening. You could have bought Limited after it had 100 stores open. You have plenty of time to do a little bit of work. It's not that hard. People are very careful with their money. When they buy a refrigerator, they do some work. When they buy an apartment or they rent an apartment, they're careful. For some reason, when it comes to stocks, they just go cuckoo. They don't do any work at all.
You have exemplified the patience you preach. You've said yourself that your big winners tend to come the second, third, fourth year you own them, not the first week or the first month. Where do you, as a patient investor, look now?
Well, I think the great values today are more in the obscure, the secondary companies. Companies such as Bergen Brunswick, Circuit City, Collins Foods, Henley Group, Hudson Bay Company, companies like Nurco. I mean, those kind of companies, Sims, Stewart & Stevenson, United Technologies, U.S. Shoe looks attractive, Verity. I have about 25 more. I'm afraid to run over to Masterpiece Theater. But I mean, it's more of the obscure companies that, it's not that the mainstream of companies have done very well. They need a rest.
You were ahead of the market last year in one respect in that you always have avoided technology companies because you say you don't understand what they do.
Right.
Are these all companies where you understand what they do?
I have a very good idea, yes. I have a very good idea what they company. U.S. Shoe I can understand. They've come up with finally a comfortable shoe for women. Carolyn thinks this thing's going to work. Easy Spirit, she's tried it, it's comfortable. And they have a turnaround lens crafters. I can understand these companies. I do get caught up in technology. Normally near the high, I finally wind up and give up and buy them. And now some of the technology stocks are actually cyclicals. And there's a chance in companies like Intel. There's chances in companies like a turnaround could occur in companies like Control Data or IBM. So I'm looking at those as special situations today.
Peter, before I turn you over to the panel, I want to ask you one other question about your own performance, which has been so spectacular, but I think it would be instructive to people. How often have you had big declines in your fund in the past decade?
Okay. Well, I've had, in the 12 years I've run the fund, 8 times the fund has declined 10 to 30%, which is about equal to the stock market. In the last 70 years, the market has had 40 declines of 10%. 13 of those have averaged about 33%, big ones. And that I don't think we're having one like that coming. I think it's very possible. People have to say, what's the likelihood the market's going to go down in 10, 15%? What am I going to do in a year when that happens? Am I going to buy more shares? Am I going to add to my fund? If they're going to retire in a year, if they have to send their child to college in a year, they should be in the bank now. They should be in a money market fund. These stocks are very random over 12 months. And that's a big mistake. If you buy a 3-month option, you discover that fast.
Let's go to a 3-panelist option, starting with Carter Randall.
Peter, your fund is highly diversified either because you want it that way or it has to be that way. Right. How diversified should an individual be?
Well, I think a person should only follow 5 or 6 companies. Some companies they know something about. They work in the chemical industry, they work in the insurance industry, they supply those industries. They have a big edge over me. They see those turn way the heck ahead of me. Or it's some local company they know something about. So I think they should follow 5 or 6 companies and maybe own 1 or 2. You only need 1 or 2 good stocks a decade. You don't need a lot of action. People are so confused in that element. All you make, when you put $1,000 in a stock, all you can lose is 1,000. I've proved that a lot of times. But you can make 10,000, you can make 15,000. Right. You have to be patient. It doesn't happen the first hour. For some reason, Eric can understand it. You lose money fast in the stock market. You can't make it fast. So persons, they should know what they own. That's a huge error. If they can't explain it to a 5th grader in 1 minute or less, If the reason they own a stock is this sucker's going to go up, they're off to a rough start. There should be a real rational reason. They should be watching about 5 or 6 stocks.
Okay. Peter, we seem to have a meltdown theory for everything every few years, and the latest big meltdown theory and excuse for not owning stocks is because of real estate. We're both from New England, and we know that there's at least a little bit of truth to the fear. Right. What would you say to people who are suffering from that anxiety?
Okay. There's only been one major downturn since World War II in average housing. This occurred in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. People moved there with their family for a job in the oil boom. They moved to Alaska. They put 5% down in a house. The job went away. They left. They had no ties. They didn't have grandchildren there. They didn't have nephews. They didn't have sisters. They left. They mailed in the keys. Today, we have some very difficult commercial real estate markets, such in Arizona. But right now, residential mortgages are doing fine in Arizona. People move to Arizona for a certain reason. They're still there. 1,000 people a day are moving into California. So I still really like companies that are in this business, companies like Fannie Mae, companies like Freddie Mac, Beneficial Corp, Primerica, Golden West Financial. The average mortgage is only $80,000 for these people. They have 65% loan to value. These are very strong positions. The average house rose 4% so far this year. It's $90,000. Apartment rentals are up 2% this year. We're not having a wipeout in basic housing.
You mean last year, don't you, Peter?
Oh, that's right. What year are we in? This is 1990. I never can handle that. So there isn't a disaster coming on. There's 2.5 million people working than a year ago.
Peter, there are a lot of very bright people in the investment business that would like to have a record as good as yours. And they have resources similar to yours, chart rooms, analysts, statisticians, so on. What do you think, when you look at yourself personally, is the skill that you have that differentiates you from all the other people that are maybe just as bright, trying just as hard?
Okay, I'm very lucky. I work at Fidelity. We don't have any economists. We don't predict the stock market. We just have about 25 or 30 very hardworking people. We'll look at anything. We'll look at companies in bankruptcy. I bought them before they went in bankruptcy. That wasn't so great. But we look at everything. We're very flexible. And it's just a great company. And I think we buy companies that have all sorts of problems. Some firms are so narrow. They won't buy companies that start with the letter R. They say those managers are a bunch of jerks. We really emphasize company research. And I think that's been the difference. Trying to predict the big picture is so difficult.
Peter, we're nearly out of time. You usually describe yourself as fully invested and not a market timer, but you have about 11% in cash, and that's supposed to be the highest ever for you. What does that mean?
Well, I've been buying stocks every single day the last 3 months. For the first time in a long time, money has started to come into my fund. And I have not been able to find the stocks I want, so I'm just going to let it build up, put the money to work. I bought stocks today. I'm going to buy stocks on Monday. But I don't expect a big decline because the public has not been, like in 1987, 83, the public came in very big. Foreign buying was extremely big. We have none of those elements today.
Thanks very much, Peter Lynch. Your confidence is always unfashionable, but it seemes to work out over the years. Thanks again to our panelists. Hope you'll be back with us next week. Not once, but twice next week. First, join me Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time in most cities. Check your local listings for a 1-hour PBS special, Louis Rukeyser's 1990 Money Guide, with an array of guests from Henry Kissinger on how the rapidly changing world will affect your pocketbook, to a big city mayor with a unique solution to the drug problem, to investment whizzes of every stripe. It'll be a guide designed for you. And then join me as usual next Friday night when we'll light up the sky with a program about utilities. My guest, Ann Prevenson, is an expert on the industry that not only provides America's power, but has lately been one of the most powerful performers in the stock market. So don't forget to switch us on twice next week. Meanwhile, this has been Wall Street Week. I'm Louis Rukeyser. Happy New Year again, and good night.
Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser has been made possible by the...
My guests tonight represent two different philosophies on mutual funds. Peter Lynch, who believes that slow but steady wins the race, manages the mutual fund with the best record over the last 10 years, Fidelity Magellan. Dick Fabian, who believes in staying agile, has been publishing the Telephone Switch newsletter since 1976. Peter, we'll begin with you. What would you tell an investor to look for in a mutual fund?
I think the first thing they have to conclude is what level of risk they want to accept. If they have to start and say, if I'm going to put in $5,000, what am I going to do if it goes down 20%? If their answer is, I'll probably think about it's going to go down another 20, and I'm going to cash out, I think they should probably be in a very conservative fund, or better still, be in a money market fund or even the bank.
How would you characterize your own investment philosophy?
I would say what I've done with Magellan is I've tried to look at not predicting the market, not predicting the economy, and try and find companies where either they're a small, profitable company now and they can grow into a medium-sized company or into a large company over several years, or a company that's doing poorly right this minute, and there's some hope, there's some reason why in the next year or two things will get better. Those are the two things that I've tended to buy.
A mutual fund like yours owns a tremendous number of stocks. How many do you own right now?
750 different securities.
How in the world can you follow 750 individual securities?
Well, actually, 100 of those would represent half the fund, and about 200 would represent about 75% of the fund. And actually, I have about 75 savings and loans. And when I buy regional banks, I might buy 50 regional banks to get a big position. So when you talk to one regional bank, you've learned about some of the others. So it's not like 800 different companies. A lot of them are in the same industries. In addition, I have 3 full-time people working with me. I continue to call upon 200 or 300 companies a year myself, and these people are also doing that work.
Dick, let's bring you in. In the 10 years that ended in '84, Peter Lynch's fund was up 1,784%. Why should anyone bother about getting in and out of a fund like that? Why shouldn't they just stay in it?
Well, could we look at one other statistic along with that? In the 10 years ended 1982, okay, it was up 450%. Now, why the big discrepancy? It wasn't because 83 and 84 was so good. It was because in the 10 years ending 84, you did not have a severe bear market.
Well, I'm going to give Peter a chance to respond, but first, tell us what your philosophy would be. How would you handle the investing in mutual funds?
First of all, I know consciously that I am dependent on the portfolio manager of the fund to make money. My function is, after we make money, is not to give it back. I said in a recent issue of the letter and the commentary, if you believed in the next 10 years that we would never have another severe bear market like 73 and 74, then you should buy and hold. But if you believe that there's a probability that 73 and 74 should come again, you've got to do something to protect yourself.
So your belief is that investors in mutual funds, when they have reason to believe that the stock market is going down, should move their money into a money market fund?
Go to cash. Become conservative.
And how can they be smart enough to know when that moment is here?
Let's follow the trend. I'm a trend follower. No prediction.
Tell us how you do it.
Well, I use the 39-week average of the fund. Meaning on that is I maintain a table of the week-ending prices.
So if it's going up, you think it'll keep going up, and if it's going down, you get out?
No, if it's going up, it doesn't mean I think it's still going up. It means it is going up. And the minute it stops going up, then I get out.
Peter, why shouldn't someone go in and out, as we've just heard Dick suggest?
Well, I would support some of Dick's points. The markets have been very favorable in the 8 years I've managed Magellan. I think it's gone up 9-fold, the fund has. But in that period of time, 7 times it's declined 10 to 20%. What I'm afraid it would be is that the public, the likelihood in the next year is the market, sometime the fund's going to decline 10 or 15%, and that they'll get out when it goes down to 10 or 15%, and they won't get back in. I've seen that fund sales tend to be very low when the fund's down, and it tends to be very high after it's risen. So the public would be better off, in my opinion, just riding it out and adding to it every year.
So in your judgment, human nature would have people selling at the wrong time and buying at the wrong time?
My nature, too. I would do the same thing if I had the choice. We run our funds fully invested. I don't have that choice.
You never have any cash on hand?
Never.
What percent is cash right now?
1%.
You're going to use that up tomorrow, probably.
Well, not sure, but...
We've been saying nice things about your record, and it is terrific. But I said earlier that no-load funds had no sales charge. Your fund used to be a no-load fund. Now it charges a 3% load. Why did you go that way?
Well, as you know, when the funds charged, about 1/3 of fund sales last year were no load, 2/3 was load. Most funds are therefore sold at 8.5%, 9% load. We decided to cut it to about 2 or 3%, do the marketing ourselves, cut out the middleman, and it's very expensive. We have 200 or 300 people on the telephones to explain the funds. We have a high marketing expense. We figure over time that's a very low cost for an individual. If they pay 2 or 3% and they stay in for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that's relatively low cost.
Peter, as you know, many academicians and many unsuccessful investors say that the whole thing is a scam, that it's luck, that it's random selection, that nobody over the course of a lifetime is going to beat the markets. What's your view on that?
Well, I think if you buy just on tips, I think that's true. I think I've seen people that put a lot of money on a stock that was a half-baked idea or quarter-baked, even wasn't even warmed up. I think if you're buying companies that you understand, the individuals can do that themselves. They know what they own, they're patient with it, they keep following the fundamentals. I think they can make substantial money. But if they try and predict the market, try and predict the economy, and try and predict a stock, I think it's just too baffling. And I think it's very hard to do.
Dick, this whole question of temperament comes up in your work as well. Mm-hmm. You once said that you would never manage money for anyone under the age of 45. Why do you say that?
Well, somebody says that's reverse age discrimination. Okay. And my answer to that is until you're 45, you haven't lost enough money yet. Okay.
What do you learn when you lose it, except
how to
take pain?
No, you feel at a certain time in your life, and I feel we all go through this learning process, you feel that there's an easy way out there to make a whole lot of money. And you try them. And once you get them out of your system, and after you're 45 years of age, you wake up one morning and you look down the tunnel and you can see the light, and you realize you're running out of time, so there's no time for games anymore. Now, the program that I use is terribly dull. So unless it's serious, see, we only traded like 6 times in the last 8 years. So somebody says, well, if I'm really going to make money, you know, and I'm going to be sophisticated, I'm going to trade, how am I going to accomplish that if I only make 6 phone calls in 8 years?
Let's have your comment on the load versus no load question.
Well, first of all, I feel very strongly about Fidelity, okay? And it's not because Peter is here.
Is that uppercase Fidelity?
Yes, okay. The thing is, they have been so outstanding with their performance. I explained, some of my subscribers complain about the fact that I recommend those funds which have loads, low loads.
So you think it's more important to pick the right fund than to worry about whether it's load or no load. Peter, in picking a fund, we're trying to pick a fund with a good record. We're trying to pick a fund with a temperament at the management side akin to our own. But we also get into this whole area of how you pick good stocks, which is your job as well as any investor's. What do you look for?
Well, I think the great stocks that I've found, I think if 100 people had visited them or talked to them and kept calling them, I think 99 of them would have bought it. I just think there was something going on. It doesn't happen the first time you visit. Very rarely do you see a company and their order backlogs at record highs, the competitors just got out of business, and the stock's down from 55 to 5. That very rarely happens. Usually there's 5 negatives and 5 positives. And eventually, if you keep calling them, some of the problems go away. So I think then, at that moment in time, you say to yourself, this company's doing better. And the stock happens to be down. So I think it's the random call and keep working on it that makes the difference.
Living Legends, profiles from the National Business Hall of Fame. Brought to you by Bell South. Everything you expect from a leader.
Peter Lynch, former manager of Fidelity's Boston-based $13 billion Magellan Fund, surprised Wall Street in May 1990 by retiring at age 46. Acclaimed as America's top money manager, Lynch quit his 100-an-hour-a-week job to devote more time to his family, church, and charity. A graduate of Boston College, Lynch started at Fidelity while still an MBA candidate at Penn's Wharton School of Finance.
Well, I worked the summer '66 between years of graduate school, and then I had 2 years in the Army. And then I came back in '69. And actually, it was 8 years I was in the research department, you know, which was a long period of time. But I think in retrospect, it was terrific. If it had been just 1 year or 2 years, and all of a sudden you're managing a fund. I mean, what really counts is when you step to the plate and they start throwing those fastballs at you and the curveballs. And I think the fact I had 8 years in the research department, and I had been buying stocks since I was 20, and I was now 33, I think I was ready to, you know, have a chance to decide what stocks are overpriced and what stocks are valuable.
Were you set free in this environment in Fidelity to do just that?
Well, Fidelity, obviously, we have different types of funds. Some funds have a very strict limitation. They can only buy very conservative stocks with dividend yields, or they have to buy overseas stocks, or they have to buy cyclical stocks. Magellan Fund was a very flexible fund, so it was an ideal product. I could buy whatever I wanted, you know, as long as I understood what they did. I mean, that was the, you know, I could buy overseas companies. Volvo was my largest position at one point in time. I could buy companies that were in any industry. That was a big edge, I think.
One of your trademarks at Magellan was the number of stocks in the portfolio
right.
that you managed.
Right.
And the more your critics said it's too big, you're getting greedy, the more you were determined to prove them wrong. And you did.
Not really. No, I think those critics that you mentioned, they probably kept me on the job 3 or 4 extra years. And when the fund got to be $1 billion, people said, get out of it. When it got to be $3 billion, they said, it's too big, forget about it, leave. And then in the last 5 years I managed the fund, it beat 99% of all funds, and it was the largest fund in the country. That's what I'm most proud about.
Would you make the analogy that is it closer when you manage a fund to an art or a science?
Oh, it's definitely an art. I mean, it's clearly an art. I mean, if it was a science, everybody would hire
it's buy time in a Cray computer, an IBM computer, put all the variables in, everybody be a billionaire. I mean, it's clearly an art.
Living Legends, profiles from the National Business Hall of Fame. Brought to you by Bell South. Everything you expect from a leader.
Peter Lynch, former manager of Fidelity's Magellan Fund, built the nation's largest mutual stock fund from $20 million in 1977 to $13 billion in 1990, leading it through bull markets in the 1987 Wall Street crash. Lynch believed common sense was the best way to make money for Magellan shareholders, who numbered 1 out of every 100 Americans.
My responsibility, I thought, was always to buy the best stocks. Explain to them the market's going to be volatile, and that they should understand that only part of their assets should be in stocks. And if they're going to retire in a year or send their child to college in a year, to put all their life savings in my fund doesn't make any sense, because what it's going to do in 12 months is random. You can flip a coin. It'll go up, it'll go down. The market's random. But over 5 or 10 years, the market's relatively predictable. That's something I try to explain to people.
What clues did you have about the bull market in '82?
None at all. What I had in '82 is the fact that interest rates were, the prime rate got up to 20%. We had record unemployment, record inflation. You just had to make a bet. Is the country going to hold together?
Well, you must have thought things were going pretty well to take a vacation in October of '87.
Right, yeah.
I mean, what did you think was going to happen, and in hindsight, what happened?
And in October of '87, we had planned this trip for about 2 or 3 years to go to Ireland and see a lot of different golf courses and a lot of inns. And obviously, I had no idea the market was going to drop 5 or 8 points. The first day I was there on Friday, it went down 100. And we left Thursday night after work. And the first day we were in Ireland, the market was open. The market went down over 100 points. And I said to Carol, if it goes down on Monday, we're going home. Guess what? It went down 508 on Monday. So in 2 days, I lost about $3 billion worth of my fund. I figured if I worked the whole week, there'd be nothing left when I came home. So it's only weighed 2 working days.
From your experience, I mean, the market fell 33% between August and October. Now, that happens every 6 years statistically. What was different this time?
The market, people remember that it fell very rapidly. But prior to it, the market had risen 1,000 points in 11 months. Went from 1,700 to 2,700 in 11 months. And then it fell 1,000 points in 3 months, almost 2.5 months. So the fact that it had this rapid, it took 4 years to go up 800 points, or basically 900 points. And then 11 months, it went on another 1,100. So the advance was so fast that it corrected. So in October of '87, you were exactly where you were in September of '86. You had gone from 1,700 to 2,700, back to 1,700. Nothing had really happened. Companies were doing okay. The economy was, interest rates are coming down.
What do you think history will say about the '80s and the mentality on Wall Street?
There was a lot of excesses. There was a lot of easy money around. Some people, were subdued by that. I think that was a mistake. But that's the way. There's always greed out there. There'll be greed there in the '90s. There'll be greed in the 2050s.
Tomorrow, taking the mystique out of Wall Street.
Living Legends, profiles from the National Business Hall of Fame. Brought to you by Bell South. Everything you expect from a leader.
Peter Lynch, the Wall Street wizard who transformed Fidelity's Magellan Fund, believes in buying stock in companies easily understood by the average consumer. His method of spotting small, well-run and growing businesses led him to invest in Hanes Hosiery and Dunkin' Donuts. Since 1977, Lynch's Magellan Fund returned 2,470%, as compared to a return of little better than 500% in Standard & Poor's 500 stock index.
What you do is basically you look for companies that have something unique. Like an example would be Toys R Us. When I first found that, they only had 7 or 8 stores. You said to yourself, this concept could have 200 or 300 stores.
Now, by nature, some of those companies might be very boring.
Well, yeah, that's terrific. That's great. Companies that are boring are wonderful for me. I've done well with companies like Dunkin' Donuts. Well, companies like that, they're very easy to understand. No one's going to invent a better donut somewhere at MIT. You don't have to worry about Korean imports.
How do you analyze a Dunkin' Donuts company?
Well, there's a company that upgraded their stores. They'd spent a lot of time on the quality of their product. They really spent a lot of time to have a china cup. Their cup was worth over $1 instead of just having a piece of paper or a plastic cup. They said, we want to deliver something very good to the consumer. They really worked on the quality of their coffee. You know, every 15 minutes they'd throw it away, and they'd cook it within 3 degrees of the right temperature. They really cared about all
Did you
of
find that in an annual report?
No, you had to go visit them and talk to them. But you could find it out. You'd say, this is something that really makes sense. And the nice thing about it is, if somebody comes up with a good donut system, and they really have a great concept, it's in the state of Washington, it's not going to affect Dunkin' Donuts if they're located in Virginia, if they're located in Massachusetts.
Now, how did you stumble on legs?
This is a product my wife said, worked very good. And at that point in time, I did a little bit of research, and I found out the average woman goes to the supermarket about twice a week. And all the hosiery being sold in the supermarkets was just junk. So here's a company that made a good product, put it into the supermarkets, put it into the drugstores, made it readily available. It was an incredible success. It was the most successful product of the 1970s after Pampers. But Pampers was part of a very big company called Procter & Gamble. This is part of a relatively small company called Hanes. So the stock was a huge success. It was eventually bought out by Consolidated Foods, a company who's now called Sara Lee. If it wasn't bought out, I think it would have been a 100-bagger instead of just a 10-bagger. It was a big success.
At what point do you decide in a company to cut your losses?
It's only if the company's doing poorly. If you bought a company because you thought this new product was going to work, or the aluminum industry was turning around and you know something about the aluminum industry, if all of a sudden the product isn't working or the industry's getting worse, if you're wrong in the fundamentals, then you sell. If the company's doing fine and the stock goes down, that's a great opportunity.
Tomorrow, Lynch's Guide to Picking Stocks.
Living Legends, profiles from the National Business Hall of Fame. Brought to you by Bell South. Everything you expect from a leader.
The stock market is a special field. I mean, it's an art. I mean, you could be a plumber and be great in the stock market.
Investment guru Peter Lynch, former manager of Fidelity's Magellan Fund, wrote one up on Wall Street to guide the small investor. He says finding a 10-bagger, or a stock that makes 10 times the money invested, may only be as far away as the local shopping mall. Lynch contends that anyone can pick stocks as well as the experts.
Well, it's kind of upsets me that people think that they, in the stock market, it's called a small investor doesn't have a chance. They think they're sort of like a high school basketball team playing against the Los Angeles Lakers or the Boston Celtics. The average investor has a great opportunity if they use their advantages. If they try and predict the stock market, they try and buy things they don't know anything about, they're not going to do well. If they're going to try and just say wake up in the morning, say now's the time to buy Microsoft, and they don't know what the company does, they're off to a rough week.
Outline the basic mistakes.
Well, first of all, they don't spend any time. When they buy a microwave oven, they might spend 2 hours of research on that, and for a $300 purchase, and they'll put $10,000 on a stock, and they won't spend 10 minutes looking at the company. So a little bit of work. You have plenty of time in the stock market. You could have bought Walmart 10 years after it was public and made 10 times your money after that. So you have lots of time to say, this company is really different, it's really unique. They have lots of time to roll. They're still only in a third of the country. So time is on your side in the stock market. It's not against you. People are too impatient.
So the basic lesson of what happens to a stock in 1 or 2 years, ignore that, but watch the earnings.
That's right. That's right. You should say, if I own 10 good companies over 4, 5, 10 years, some won't work out, some will do very well, but in total, I'm going to do better and have my money in the bank. But over 12 months or 6 months, it's totally unpredictable.
Let's go through your approach just very quickly, summarizing the kind of strategy.
Right.
Do you talk to economists about?
No, you cannot predict the economy. That's hopeless.
That's hopeless. Market research.
Waste. You can't predict the stock market. And no one's ever predicted it right twice in a row.
Testing the product yourself.
That's very important. That's very important.
What am I leaving out?
Well, interest rates. A lot of people worry about interest rates. Obviously, if you've been able to predict interest rates, you've been able to predict the stock market. But no one can do that either. So all these basic things relate to, I can't predict the stock market, I can't predict the economy.
You don't watch the Fed. No,
don't watch what they're doing. But if I call up Sears, and Sears says, the carpet industry is getting better, I can use that information. I can then, I might not buy Sears, but I might look at 5 carpet companies. When I talk to General Motors, and they tell me steel prices are finally firming up, I might go look at 5 steel companies. Those are facts. I can deal with facts. When somebody tells me we're going to have a big recession 2 years from now, or a year from now, that's weather forecasting. I can't do anything with it. Useless.
Tomorrow, taking time to smell the roses.
Living Legends, Profiles from the National Business Hall of Fame. Brought to you by Bell South. Everything you expect from a leader.
Peter Lynch, manager of the nation's largest and most profitable mutual stock fund for 13 years, left his job at Fidelity's Magellan Fund in 1990. Lynch's decision to retire young was influenced by his father's death at 46 when Peter was only 10.
It's very hard to get a job when you're 11, 12, or 13, but as a caddy, I was able to work, quite a bit, make some money, help the family out, and it helped me get a job at Fidelity. When I was applying for a job here, there's 75 applicants for 3 spots. I was the only one to caddy for the president for 10 years, so I got one of the 3 spots, and and I worked there for the next 21 years.
And yet, personally, you didn't feel time was on your side. I mean, why do you pick up and quit at 46?
It was a funny decision because I loved what I did. I loved my fund. It's sort of like a hot fudge sundae indicator. I mean, 1 hot fudge sundae is good, 2 is not so good. When you have to eat 7, you sort of approach nausea. I had a lot of things I enjoyed. I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed my outside charitable activities. I really enjoyed my family. It all didn't fit. It just didn't fit. If we had a 9-day week or a 10-day week, I might have been able to do it. But my personality, I probably would have worked 8 days out of the 9-day week. So you can't run a fund half speed. You can't run it quarter speed. You either run it full out or you don't. I had to come to a decision saying, what I want to do the next 20, 30 years. And I decided, this was not what I wanted to do.
Do you feel that once you made that decision, people came up to you and said, gee, I know just how you feel. I'd like to do the same thing, but I can't?
That was amazing, Meryl. I thought a lot of people would be critical, a lot of people would be upset. I had over 1 million accounts in Magellan. 1 out of 100 people in the country were in the fund. I received thousands of letters, thousands of telegrams and phone calls, and almost all of them said, gee, I really wish you'd continue to run it, but I think you're doing the right thing. Thank you very much. People that weren't in the fund said, I think it's a smart decision. It was amazing. I mean, it was incredible. There was this outpouring of people saying, what a brilliant thing you're doing. I didn't think it was that brilliant. I just did it.
What advice do you give those of your generation toying with the idea of getting off the fast track?
Well, if they have enough net worth, and that's what I was lucky enough to achieve, and you're exhausted, and you can't do the things you want to do, and you have a lot of young children, and you want to spend some time with your wife, it's silly to keep working. I don't remember anybody when they're dying saying, I wish I'd spent more time in the office. I mean, I've never heard that statement. It just never occurs. I mean, you ought to say to yourself, what's good, what's fun? And if you've been blessed with enough net worth, it's silly to keep doing what you're doing.
The master of Magellan, Peter Lynch, at age 47, already a Wall Street legend.
Peter, you retired in June at the ripe old age of 46. And that was 1 month before the Dow Jones Industrials hit their all-time high. Was this timing intentional, or were you just getting out while the getting was good?
No, obviously I had no idea what was going to happen in Kuwait. I think the most important thing I've learned in the last 20 years is what's happened to corporate profits. It's magic that in 20 years, the Dow Jones average has tripled, and the profits of the Dow Jones companies have tripled. It's a direct relationship with what happens to companies' earnings and what happens to their stocks, and that's the key thing over time.
Many people argue about whether markets are undervalued or overvalued. Are you suggesting then that they're usually fairly valued?
They're always fairly valued. When you look in the last 20 years, Avon Products and Sears, these were great companies 20 years ago. They've fallen 30, 60% in price in the last 20 years. And over the same period of time, Merck, Coca-Cola have had their profits go up 15-fold. And guess what? Stock's gone up 15-fold. So even if the Dow Jones today was 500, you would have been very happy to own Coca-Cola and Merck. So there's a direct relationship. That's what you have to concentrate on. There are people that own electronic stocks that don't know the difference between an EPROM and the senior prom, and they're trying to buy stocks. And the amazing part is the public is very careful with their money. When they buy a dishwasher, when they buy a TV set, when they rent an apartment, they're careful. When it comes to the stock market, for some reason, they just don't do any work. And it's not that much. A half-an-hour work would save them a fortune.
What would they do in that half hour?
They would first of all see if the company had sales and profits. A lot of times they buy companies, there's nothing there. There's literally nothing there. There's nothing to look at. When you look at most companies, you say to yourself, I'm going to tune in later on this company. I'll give you an example. Walmart started as a public company 1 month before the show. At that point, they had 37 stores. It was October of 1970. At that point, 10 years later, you could have tuned in to Walmart. Their profits were up 20-fold, and the stock was up over 20-fold. It still had another 10 years left. Profits went up 25-fold in the last 10 years. You can make 25 times your money again. You have plenty of time. You don't have to make money. My best stocks have been the third year, the fourth year, the fifth year I own them. It's not the third week, the fourth week. People want the money very rapidly. It doesn't happen that way. You can be very disappointed in the stock market.
Let me bring John in, because you told me last time we talked on the air that you were now holding stocks for an average of 5 years. Is that still true?
Yes, Louis. We don't intend to hold them 5 years, but we find if you buy things when they're terribly unpopular and depressed, they don't suddenly come back. You have to be patient.
Peter said the market in the end is fairly valued. You've made a career of seeking bargains, so you sometimes must think it's undervalued here and there.
Very much so, yes. Very rarely is any share valued for its true price, or true value. They go in a single year's time, 50% too high and 50% too low. So it really pays to judge the values of corporations by the thousands in order to be able to tell which one has the lowest price today in relation to its true value.
This past weekend, I was with a group of academics. I mix with all segments of society. And they told me that nobody can analyze stocks, that it's all just a random walk and a very efficient market, and that the kind of advice that you people give and the kind of analysis you do is worthless. How do you reply to them?
That's just resigning from the game. If you take the game of tennis, exactly as many losers as winners, but that's no reason to give up playing tennis.
Good for you, John. Peter, you talked about the mistake of impatience. What are some of the other mistakes people make? And then let John answer that as well, but you start.
Well, it's obviously not doing the homework and not looking into the company. I mean, if you don't know what they do, you have a rough start. Because the market in the last 20 years had 10 declines of 10% or more. And great companies go down. And in those declines, you have a great opportunity. I remember when the market went down in 1987, Dreyfus fell to $17 a share. They had $17 a share in cash. I mean, that was ridiculous. So you have to take an opportunity. Most people have the brain power. Almost everybody in this plan has the brain power to make money in the stock market. The question is whether you have the stomach for it and whether you're willing to do a little bit of work. Those are the key elements. It's not that hard. If anybody has looked at Dunkin' Donuts, or if they look at General Public Utilities, I looked at General Public Utilities 2 years after 3 Mile Island. It already doubled. I was able to make 4 times my money on it. The company was solid.
What's your answer, John?
The main thing that people need to learn is that selecting assets is totally different from almost every other activity. If you go to 10 doctors and they tell you the same medicine, that's the thing to take. You go to 10 engineers to build a bridge, they tell you the same thing, that's the base. But you go to 10 investment advisors and they pick out the same asset, you better stay away from it. To say the same thing, in other words, the time when an asset is selling at its best bargain price is when most people are trying to sell. There's no other reason why an asset will go down to a bargain price. And if you wait until you're through the tunnel and out into the sunshine, you'll have to pay a premium price. If you even wait until you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, you are already past the best bargain days.
Many people think it's foolish to be a long-term optimist because we have so many problems in this country. There's problems of debt, public and private, problems of less than perfect political leadership in either party, problems of a growing international competition. How can you buy stock? Why don't you just run for the hills?
Well, the beauty of the stock is if you put $1,000 in the stock, all you can lose is 1,000. I mean, I've proven that many times. If you're right, you can make 5,000. You can make 10,000. You don't have to be right half the time. If you're right 3 times out of 10, and the times you recognize the company's doing well, you understand what they do, you add to it, and you take advantage of it, you can make a lot of money.
You're talking about finding companies.
Yeah,
Does the overall state of the economy not affect you at all?
You never can predict the economy. You can't predict the stock market. But when you look at Dunkin' Donuts, you say they have the best donut chain. You don't have to worry about Korean imports. You don't have to worry about what's happening with M1 and M3B. You just say to yourself, they're doing well.
They know what to give you for dessert.
That's what all gets down. What happens to the company, you don't own a lottery ticket. Time's on your side when you own a stock. You work with that company and you'll do well.
What do you think, John? We look to the future. You never think it's a dark future, but what do you say about these problems?
There will be bear markets about twice every 10 years and recessions about twice every 10 or 12 years, but nobody has been able to predict them reliably. So the best thing to do is to buy when shares are thoroughly depressed. and that means when other people are selling.
Is this one of those times right now?
In all of my 50 years of investment counsel, I cannot recall a month in which there was such almost universal pessimism as there were last month in October. So that doesn't prove that we can't get still more pessimistic, but if you're already the most pessimistic in 50 years, you must be somewhere near the bottom.
At the start of the past decade, you electrified our audience by predicting that we could get to around 3,000 in the next decade. They laughed when you sat down to play, but it turned out to be almost precisely right. Carter has now stolen a march on you. He's predicted 10,000 in 20 years, but what do you see in 10 and 20 years?
I think the next 20 years will be just as marvelous as the past 20. In the past 20 years, the standard of living has gone up 60%. The earnings have gone up threefold. The dividends have gone up threefold. The gross national product has gone up fivefold. And I would think our studies indicate that that would be what we expect for the future, including share prices. The share prices have normally doubled in America about every 10 years. So 20 years out, they should be 4 times as high.
People say to me, John, now you're approaching middle age yourself, so when you get there, you'll have to answer this question personally. People say to me, gee, I'm 62 years old. I can't afford to buy stocks. I need income. What do you say to those people?
They would come out much better if they would buy a well-managed common stock fund and then just tell the fund to send them what income they need to spend. Almost every mutual fund will send you whatever you request per year, per quarter, a month. So it's a standard system, and if you trace it back, investing that way will give you the income you want plus capital gains.
Peter, do you believe that stocks will continue to outperform other investments?
Absolutely. Particular stocks. You have to be very careful. That's the key point. Some stocks, in the next 20 years, a lot of money is going to be made, a lot of money is going to be lost. I think the people that gamble and they buy options, what a tragedy if you're right on a company. You have a 3-month option on it or a 6-month option. Times on your side, if you own the right companies and you follow them, some people are playing, it's like playing poker without looking at your cards. They're playing bridge without looking at your cards. They own companies, and they don't look at it. They call the broker twice a day to get the price of the stock. That doesn't count. You have to do a little bit of work. You have to be out to the malls, maybe a half an hour a month looking at why do you own this company. The reason is this sucker's going to go up. That's not a very good reason.
You said earlier that you like companies to have earnings. You realize that many brokers will think that's needlessly picky.
Well, when I look over the last 20 years, I think more of the turnaround at Chrysler, the turnaround of Ford, the turnaround of Boeing. You have to say to yourself, does this company have a reasonable chance of turning around? Do they have good products? And are they going to be solvent? It'd be really sad to own a company when they're doing badly. Because I used to follow the textile industry. They had a great expression. It's always darkest before pitch black. When your past things are bad, they always get worse. You want to look to see, is this company going to be around? Very important statistic.
Thank you both for your common sense and your optimism at a time when
we begin with Peter Lynch. Time magazine has called him America's #1 money manager. During the 13 years he headed the Fidelity Magellan Fund, it was a top-ranked general equity mutual fund. His new book, Beating the Street, offers advice on picking stocks and maximizing profits, and he's here to talk to us about a lot of things, including his own dramatic decision, 4 or 5 years ago, Peter, welcome to the broadcast. Right. 4 or 5 years ago, you just said, I've been managing all this money, I'm going to quit.
Yep, that's right.
And you went to do what?
Well, actually, I wanted to spend more time with my wife and my children.
Right.
And it was an interesting situation because I loved my job. I adored my job. Right. And I liked outside activities. And when I was young, I wasn't involved in charity work until I was 30. Yeah. No activities. Younger children, you just read them a book and good night moon and they fall asleep and it's all over. And when they get older, there's more time involved. So I enjoyed the family. Mm-hmm. But I was leaving for work at 6 in the morning. I was getting home at 7 o'clock at night, 6 days a week.
This was in Boston?
Yeah, traveling 14 days a month. It was just too much. So I said, I said, that's it. I can't take it. And fortunately, I had made enough money to say I could give up the job. So I didn't have to give up the family or the outside activities.
And so what happened then? So you did what with your life?
Well, I cut back from about a 80, 90-hour week to a 40 or 50-hour week. And in the morning, I make breakfasts and lunches for the kids, and I do the spelling words and the Spanish words. And Carolyn does the math and the science, and I see Carolyn in the morning, and off I go to a place. You have to go, in my opinion, you have to go somewhere to do something. If you stay at home, you wind up answering the telephone or watching cartoons. So or falling asleep, taking a nap. So she does the hard work, and I go. Fidelity gave me an office, and I have a secretary, and I spend majority of the time working on charity things like inner city schools, inner city libraries, inner city housing, United
Helping
Way.
people manage their money, or
No, not at all. None
just,
of that. No.
just
Some of the charities I'm on the investment committee
Right.
of some of the Museum of Fine Arts. I'm involved in Mass General Hospital, Boston College, but United Way. But all the extra things I added to were real hands-on, actually being involved in charitable activities.
You wrote a book called One Up on Wall Street, and I think that's one of the best-selling books ever about Wall Street, if I'm not correct, and you can correct me. And so why then did you write another book?
Okay. First of all, I was very lucky. I wrote it with John Rothschild. He made a big difference. But I think the reason I wrote it is I try to explain to people their great advantages, their edges they have, and that they should get involved in stocks.
Right.
And they should do it on the right basis.
This was on the first book.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously I didn't make a great impression because the percent of people's assets involved in stocks has gone down. In 1960, people had 40% of their financial assets, including their house, in stocks and mutual funds. In 80, that was down to 25%. It's now down to 17%.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think people, in the decade of the 80s was the best decade this century for stocks. I think people managed to lose money in the 80s doing it themselves because their methods were so flawed. So I really feel as though I wanted people to understand. I don't want anybody to buy a stock. I'm saying if you're going to buy a stock, you should do certain things.
Right.
If you're not willing to do these things, you should leave your money in the bank.
Your philosophy is simple, and I'm remembering this from the previous book. I think we're now talking about the previous book.
Correct.
Your philosophy was, if you find something that you identify with. I remember there was a story of your wife and her hose.
Yeah.
Your wife kept saying,
legs
these
and
are
the panties. Oh, you
legs,
got it.
Yeah, the legs and panties. Your wife said, these are the greatest things I've ever seen.
Right.
And when your wife said that, you knew that this was a product that was better.
Right.
You used to stay at La Quinta Motel.
Right.
And the service was better, whatever was better.
Right. The price was good.
And
too.
the price was good too. And
Yeah.
you said, this is a place that I can determine. I, Peter Lynch, can tell that this is a good product, right?
That's right.
And if these people are making a good product,
That's
then their earnings are going to go up, therefore the stock's going to go up.
Right.
And that's the kind of decision-making process you ought to go through.
Right.
Do I have it?
You've got it exactly right. Well, I don't think people understand there's 100% correlation with what happens to a company's earnings over several years and what happens to the stock. If the company, McDonald's has done very well as a company, the stock has done very well. People worry about too much money supply, what's happened to the price of oil, who's the president, who's being nominated for the Supreme Court,
It's all
the ozone
earnings.
layer. It has nothing to do. McDonald's earnings go up the next 10 years, the stock will go up.
Yeah, but what they will say to you, Peter, is that, as you know, and why am I telling you this, but anyway, it's fun to tell you this, they're telling you that these other things influence the amount of earnings of a particular company.
Yeah.
If we're in a recession, people are not going to spend
That's
as
right.
much money on going to the movies
Absolutely.
or whatever they do.
Right.
And therefore, you got to pay attention to these other things because they impact on earnings.
They are very important, but you have no idea of knowing what they're going to do. Alan Greenspan's the head of the Federal Reserve.
Right.
He cannot predict interest rates.
Yes.
He'd be the first to
He
tell
can
you.
influence them, but he can't predict them.
He cannot predict what long-term interest rates are going to be 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. He's even surprised how low they are now.
Right.
So how am I supposed to predict interest rates? How am I supposed to predict the economy? You certainly remember the recession of '82.
Yes.
1982, we had a 20% prime rate, 14% unemployment, 12% inflation. I don't remember anybody telling me in 1980 or 81 that was going to happen. Yeah. All of a sudden, we had the worst recession since the Depression. I didn't read about it in the paper. So it's crazy to think about these things.
Here's a quote from you. I own Dunkin' Donuts. When you own Dunkin' Donuts, you don't have to worry about Korean imports. You don't have to worry about M2 or M3. These are money supply figures, aren't they?
Yep.
And what's happening to the money supply? This is the way you make money. If you don't understand what the company does, you should not be in it. If you could predict the stock market, you could predict the economy, you could predict interest rates. If you go buy the wrong stocks, you're going to lose half your money anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm saying people have natural advantages.
Yeah.
Let's say what you do for a living is you're involved in the restaurant industry.
Right.
You supply paper products. You supply kitchen equipment. You help build restaurants.
Right.
You saw McDonald's. You saw Chi-Chi's. You saw Chili's. You saw Cracker Barrel. You saw Dunkin' Donuts, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Taco Bell.
These are all success stories.
These were 40-fold. You made 40 or 50 times your money. You don't need to make that kind of money many times in your life, right?
Yeah, no.
That's all you had to do was follow the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
People are in industries. They're in the publishing industry. They're in the chemical industry, the paper. Why don't they just stay with that industry? You only need a few stocks a decade. How many good stocks do you need in a lifetime? Instead of people that are in the restaurant industry, they're buying biotechnology stocks. Right. The people in the chemical industry
nothing about
know nothing
biotech.
about it. The people in the chemical industry are buying oil stocks.
Right.
It's absolutely absurd. People don't understand their natural advantages, and they don't use them. So that's bad, number one. But worse, number two, is if you don't think you're a good ice skater, or if you're convinced you're not a good cellist, you're not going out and try it. But people are buying stocks anyway. They're not discouraged. They just think it's a gamble.
Yeah.
So therefore, they go forward and they bet on one stock for a week and a half, and it goes up, and they make $2 on it. Then they sell it, and they buy something else. When 3 years is over, all they've done is generate a lot of commissions. And they've probably lost money. That's a mistake.
So your advice is what?
If you don't understand a company, if you can't explain it to a 10-year-old in 2 minutes or less,
yes,
don't own it. Because when it goes down, let's say the stock goes down 2 points.
You won't understand what's going on.
What do you do? Do you buy more? Do you flip a coin?
And chances are your broker doesn't either?
He or she certainly doesn't know about it. I mean, who knows what what all these things are with auto backplanes and megaflops? Who knows what all these
So buy what you know.
Buy in your industry, buy what you know, buy local companies.
Yeah, so suppose you don't have an industry. I mean, you don't really...
You buy local companies, companies in your own industry. 10 years after Walmart went public, 10 years after it went public. 10 years after it went public. It's a 25-year-old company now. Right. You could have bought the stock and made 50 times your money on it. 50 times.
This is, if you bought it 10 years
after it was public already.
Yeah.
It already gone up 5-fold. So you could have made 250-fold. But I'm saying, let's say you were in a town, they came into it and they said, boy, these prices are great, they're doing terrific, I like the bargains, and you checked it out. You spent a little bit of work on it.
Yeah.
I mean, people are very careful. When they buy a dishwasher, they do some research. They'll put $10,000 in some stock they hear on a bus. So if you did a little bit of research, you'd say, Walmart's only 10% of the country. They're not even saturated there. Why can't they go to the rest of the country?
So is this is more of the same? Is it what it is?
It's more of the same, plus I show examples. It's a touch more detailed. It actually shows me in action.
Right.
I picked 21 stocks early in 1992. Some work, some don't. I follow those companies. Some of the companies, the fundamentals deteriorate. Some they improve. I watch those companies go through the year. I also explain the retail industry. I try and make it very simple. And I talk about a wonderful example. Is a 7th grade class.
Yeah.
The teacher of that read my book, and my first book that you were talking about. You and I did a show on that in Washington. You remember that show? This is a long time ago. She read the book, and I said, if you made it through 5th grade math, you can do it in the stock market. She says, okay. She started teaching it in 7th grade, 7th grade class. These kids had to study companies. They had to look at their balance sheets to see if they're solvent. And they picked stocks. These stocks were up 69% over 2 years when the market was up only 20. And they picked stocks like Limited, they picked The Gap, they picked Walt, they understood these companies. They also picked IBM. I lost money on that too. I mean, everybody makes mistakes.
Everybody did, yeah.
But I'm saying this was a school, St. Agnes' School in Arlington, Mass. But in addition, in the decade of the 80s, there was 8,000 investment clubs. These are amateur, sort of average people just investing. These investment clubs, 62% of them, of these clubs, beat the market. In the decade of the 80s, only 25% of professionals beat the market.
Right, let me go back to one other subject. You're coming back to Fidelity, aren't you? Aren't you going to do something?
When I finish this book, I've been working about 1 or 2 days a week the last year and a half on this book.
Right.
Now I'm done with the book. I'm going to go back to maybe 1 day a week, working with the younger analysts, just listening to them, talking to them. I'm not telling them to buy Xerox,
so you're not
to sell
rejoining
Xerox.
your old lifestyle.
Not totally. I'm not going to run another fund. 13 years was plenty of running a fund. I'm just going to work with younger analysts, let them ask questions, I'll ask them questions. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Now, do you manage any money for anybody other than yourself?
No, manage. I manage money with other people for some charities.
Right.
But no, I don't manage anybody's accounts.
You're not doing some mutual fund,
no,
some pension fund, some
nothing. I'm out.
university
Cold
fund.
turkey. No.
All right. Cold turkey, did you?
Cold turkey.
Now, are you happy you did this? I mean,
obviously delighted. It's great.
You know, and you like your new life?
Oh, it's fabulous.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about the Clinton economic plan. What do you think of it?
Yeah. Well, I think his theories are excellent. You know, we clearly.
Which theories are excellent?
Well, he claims that we're going to do more investing and less spending.
Right.
And that statement you can't argue with.
Less consumption, more saving.
You absolutely have to invest more in education. You have to invest more in companies. You have to invest less in just spending money. I mean, today people are encouraged to spend. You spend money. Let's say you put an addition on your house. Right. You spend money on that. That you can get a tax deduction because the interest on it is tax deductible. Mm-hmm. If you invest, if you take your money and put it in the bank, you're taxed at a very high rate. They have this incredibly unfair term. It's called unearned income. Every time I do on the income taxes, and I fill out the number for what you made, the money you put in the bank, and it's called unearned income. It's an insulting term. But anyway, if you buy a stock and you make money on it, you pay a 28% tax on it.
Yeah.
Guess what the capital gains rate is in Japan?
Capital gains rate in Japan is 10%.
Zero.
Right.
I mean, we're not encouraging people to save. We're not encouraging people to invest.
So
we're encouraging people to spend.
You're in favor of the elimination of the capital gains tax that Bush proposed?
Reducing it or eliminating it. And I'm glad that Clinton didn't raise it. I mean, he raised other taxes. This fairness thing I understand.
And what about this tax the rich business? You buy that?
I think fairness, it's a debate what's fair. I certainly think raising taxes is appropriate if it's at the same time you cut the spending. It's a lot easier to raise taxes than cut spending. If we can cut spending and get government's share of the gross national product reduced, it'll be fair. But our country works very well. It's working extremely well. I mean, you just don't want it to spin out of control.
You don't buy into the stimulus package, though.
Don't buy into that at all.
You believe that we don't need to go out and create jobs
Charlie,
for people.
we've had 8 recessions since World War II. We've got out of every one of them. This is number 9. There's nothing unique about the system. We'll get out of this one. And the decade of the 80s, the 1980s, we had 18 million jobs in the United States.
Yeah, but as soon as you say that, as you know, people are saying, yeah, Peter, but look what we did. When Ronald Reagan came to the White House, the deficit was what, $70 billion, $65, $70 billion, and now it's approaching $350 billion.
Right.
And the amount of money that we have to spend to pay off the interest on that debt is saddling us and destroying us and destroying what,
You're right. I agree. You're right. I agree with that.
Don't tell me how many jobs we created in the 1980s, because you can always create jobs if you're willing to.
No, the government didn't create that.
Right.
The 500 largest companies in the 80s eliminated 3 million jobs. Eliminated 3 million, and we added 18 million. These 2.2 million businesses started. 2.2 million businesses started in the 80s. Now, some of them didn't make it.
Right.
But if on average they have 10 employees today, that's 22 million jobs. The only thing that creates wealth, the only thing that creates taxes to pay for all these wonderful things is jobs. There is something magic about jobs, and jobs come from companies starting.
That's what I was trying to say. Small companies create jobs, right?
Create all the jobs.
Yeah, right.
So that's what I'm talking. This is not voodoo economics. This is the real thing. You have to encourage people to take some risk, to put their money out, and go start a business. It's a risky proposition.
And you do that by what kind of government policies other than a 0 capital gains or a 10% capital gains?
Lower interest rates.
What's the capital gains at now? 28%
plus. Okay. It's the highest capital gains rate we've ever had in the history of this country.
Right.
It's never been this high. I mean, it's terrible how high the capital gains rate is. That's not encouraging people to invest. What you want to have lower interest rates, lower paperwork. People start a business now. They have this much paperwork to fill out on
that's
forms.
Regulation. They go crazy
but
over
that's
regulation.
crazy. You've got to cut that out.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay, but I mean,
if
a lot of people
say,
say without those kind of regulations, then people would be dumping into the rivers and not protecting the environment.
No, but these are regulations and what size.
And not protecting the health of their employees. I mean, look what happened down in my home state of North Carolina because of the fire they had down there. I mean, people say if you don't have some kind of government regulation and companies aren't doing their job to protect their workers, then this is not the kind of society.
But some of these regulations relate to the size of your paper clips. I mean, exactly. There's a lot of waste. I mean, some of this paperwork is mind-boggling.
And sometimes you can do it with one piece of paper.
That's it.
Right.
I mean,
okay.
that would be a good policy. I think Clinton really wants to make it work.
Yeah.
The capitalist system works. Obviously, you want to protect the consumer, and business people carry to extreme. When the oil monopoly and the steel monopoly, that's wrong too. I mean, I think trust should be broken up. There is a role for government.
IBM, what happened to them?
IBM had a wonderful business. They used to go to companies like Fidelity, Chase Manhattan. They used to come and explain to these people how to use computers.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to use computers.
Yeah.
They went to companies and went in with very talented, experienced people. IBM, and explained to people how to use computers. Today, all these companies, like Johnson & Johnson's, American, Bristol Myers, they have people in the company already that know computers backwards and forwards. Right. The same IBM people walk in with these solutions. They don't need all those people.
So all these companies took IBM's business away from them?
No, they do internally. They have experts internally now that are trained in, it's called now management information systems. They have all these fancy acronyms for it. They have skilled people. All they want now is software and a cheap box. Right. They don't need all these. So IBM was dealing in a system that was very effective for 3 or 4 decades. Now the technology has moved to the chip. The technology has moved to the software. It's not the box. It's not the storage device.
So what should IBM do? What should this board of directors of IBM, which is looking for a new chief executive officer, what should they be looking for? Well, I hear people saying they ought to just, Mort Meyerson, the number 2 guy to Ross Perot down there, said maybe they ought to dismember the thing. Well, or maybe they ought to create all kinds of little entrepreneurial companies from within, break it up.
They'll eventually, they have incredible technology. They're very skilled. They have a lot of determination. Right now, unfortunately, it's sad, they have too many employees. They have too many factories. They try to do it all themselves. They're working the right direction. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the direction they're going. They will turn it around. They're in a hard process. because the technology is advancing all the time.
What was the genius of Bill Gates and Microsoft, which now has a higher net worth than IBM, doesn't it?
Well, there's a lot of bright people. Oh my God, his net worth alone might be more than IBM's profits. I mean, yeah.
You meant him individually.
Yeah,
right.
His brilliance. There's a lot of brilliant people, and a lot of luck. IBM adopted MS-DOS as the operating system.
Right.
They rushed the market with the first computer. They needed an operating system, and he had the only one. If they'd waited a couple years, they could have used their own. So MS-DOS became the basic operating system of every computer, whether it was a compact computer. The only computer system that didn't use it was Apple. Apple had their own operating system. So every computer that went out there all over the world needed MS-DOS. He used that to come along with Windows. So he was there. He was like the gasoline. When people, whatever car, if you had the rights to all the gasoline, you don't care whose cars.
Or said another way, I mean, IBM was making all of these razors, and he was making all the razor blades.
You got it right. Yeah, absolutely. And then there were other people making razors to use his blades.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He had the only razor blades around.
No, obviously he's a bright person.
And rich.
Yeah. And EDS, Ross Perot came on.
What do you think of Perot?
I think he's a well-meaning, talented guy. He's done a lot of good things in education.
Would you vote for him for president?
I did.
You did?
Yep.
Perot was your guy?
Yep, I sure did.
Why?
Well, it was sort of a protest vote because I know in our state, in our state, I know in Massachusetts the Democrat was going to win anyway. Right. And I really thought his concepts of cutting down on the deficit and more investment.
Cutting down on the deficit is a good idea.
Oh, it's absolutely a good idea. Right. It's a terrific idea.
Give me 5 good stocks to watch, not to buy, but just to watch. 5 ideas that you think where people are really on the right track and created a good business.
Well,
I think not touting stocks, America. I just want to know what Peter likes.
Okay. Well, we have a company in Boston called Oba Pan. It's a company that makes croissants and they make breads and they have a state-of-the-art bagel they're working on. I can understand that company.
Me too.
They're only in about 20% of the country. They're starting to roll. Yeah. Right now, I think, the price is fully priced. And I think now is the time
What's it selling for? What's fully priced?
Oh, I mean, it's 25 times next year's earnings.
Right,
I mean, that's very high.
Right.
But I think over the long period of time, I'm hoping the market goes down and the stock will go down and I'm going to back up the truck and buy a lot of shares. I think now's the time to look at cyclical stocks. I think the economy is going to get better around the world in '94. It's already getting better in '93 in the United States.
And even better in '94.
Better in '94 because right now it's slumping in Germany and it's slumping in Japan. So I think now's the time to look at cyclical companies in the paper industry, the aluminum industry, the steel industry. They've cut the costs. They're the lowest cost producers in the world. And when things get better, they're going to make a lot of money.
What about little small companies we should look at?
Oh, there's tens of thousands.
Well, name one.
A small company? Well, I guess I'd say Oba Pan's the small ones. Or another one would be J. Baker is a relatively small company.
What do they do?
It's a retailer. Or Supercuts. They do haircuts. That's a small company.
Peter Lynch is back with a new book called Beating the Street. It is always interesting to have him here. What Up on Wall Street was one of the better bestsellers ever about Wall Street, and it is very simple, which most things are very simple, and when you understand them, you can understand what makes the world work. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, John.
And speaking of superstars, with me tonight are 2 of the charter members of our Hall of Fame. John Templeton, the Dean of Global Investing, tonight sets still another record by making an unprecedented 13th appearance as my guest on this program. In October 1992, he sold all his companies to Franklin Resources for close to $1 billion. After 54 stellar years in the investment community, Mr. Templeton, or Sir John, as he is known at his home in the Bahamas, now devotes his time to 30 church and charity organizations. Peter Lynch, the most successful mutual fund manager of all time, tonight makes his 8th appearance on this program and his 3rd since ostensibly retiring in June 1990. Mr. Lynch, however, is still very much a part of the financial world, both on behalf of his charitable organizations and as a member of the Fidelity Group's Board of Trustees. Gentlemen, let me start by asking each of you, what is the correct message that investors should draw from the recent tumult in the financial markets? John, you want to start?
Markets have always been volatile in almost every nation. The remarkable thing is that over 3 years went by in which the American market had no fluctuation of 10%. So we're back to normal now.
Would you agree with that, Peter?
Well, actually, I think it's 12 years in a row the market had gone up through '93. So we obviously need a pause to get back to normal levels, and I think we've done some of that already.
Is it a bear market, and do you care?
I actually couldn't find many good stocks in January. I started to salivate the last week with all these stocks coming down. If we get a real bear market, I'll have to get out my drill bucket to catch my excitement.
John, you're always after bargains, too. Do you see bargains yet?
not a lot, but there are always many good bargains. For example, the drug stocks now are thoroughly depressed. The great growth companies will double their earnings in the next 5 years. They're selling for only 12, 13, 14 times earnings, paying higher dividends than the average market, like Merck or Bristol-Myers Squibb or Johnson & Johnson.
Why do you think those stocks are so depressed? Fear that the Clinton health plan will permanently damage their interests?
That is certainly a major factor, but those companies are worldwide. They're not dependent on one nation.
Where are you looking, Peter?
Actually, Johnson & Johnson, I think, is a great stock. I agree with John. I mean, here's a company that spends $1.2 billion in R&D, and they're now cutting costs, and their stock was 58 2 years ago, and it's now 37, and they're going to raise a dividend in a month and buy in a lot of their stocks. So I think Warner Lambert's attractive, a lot of financial stocks attractive, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Travelers, so there's lots of attractive stocks around.
One stock that you mentioned on this program several times when people thought you were crazy was Chrysler. Now it's been one of the stars of the market. Do you still like the autos?
I think the autos, yeah, I think in baseball analogy, I don't think we're in the 8th or 9th inning. I think we're still in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th inning. I think we're just starting to get to trend line. I think we have several years of good growth, and now these companies have great products, good balance sheets, and they're the lowest cost in the world. So I think it's too, we're going to do well with these stocks, I think, the next couple of years.
John, you sound as if you're not convinced that this market's dirt cheap yet. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. The American market is moderately higher than has been normal throughout the American history. And the same thing is true if you look at all the markets in the world. But as always, there are many bargains if you search for them. Just for example, the bank stocks, there are going to be many more offers to buy out regional and small banks. And you take a spread of those in a fund such as Pilgrim Regional Bank Shares, they're going to have many of their holdings bought out at higher prices. And you can buy the stock at a discount.
Since you mentioned a mutual fund, it seems fair for me to ask both of you, some of the people who are pessimistic about the markets cite as a reason for their pessimism the tremendous rush of new investors into mutual funds. Is this a concern of you? Let's hear both of you on this. John, you want to start?
But they can't take their money out of Pilgrim because it's a closed-end fund. But yes, the vast amount going into mutual funds is greater than any of us ever expected to happen. But that has been true of the public putting their money into stocks before there were mutual funds. I believe putting it through mutual funds will cause less volatility than in the old days when they put it into individual stocks.
Peter, does it worry you?
Well, actually, you've had a lot of money flow in, and it's gone into 1,200 companies have gone public in the last 2 years. That's $60 billion has gone in. 1,200 companies is a big number. There's only 2,400 companies on New York Stock Exchange. So this money flowing in has gone into great investments to add to plant, add to equipment, add to research. I think it's a very productive thing for our country.
And even with the rush of interest in mutual funds, if you add the mutual fund assets to the stock assets, it's not as high a percentage of household assets as it was in the 60s.
You're right. And also, people have been very conservative. Even the 401k investors have been putting the money into bond funds or asset allocation funds or balance funds. They haven't been putting in the growth, the real speculative funds. There's been people a little crazy at the end of last year on these emerging markets and put some money there, but that was the only speculative binge we've had in the last 12 months.
Well, you touch on an interesting area. John, you have a longer history in global investing than anybody I know. Suddenly, you're in fashion. Suddenly, as of last year, everybody wanted to look at the most obscure places in the world and invest. Was that in itself a signal that the thing had been overdone?
No, it's true that for the first time the American public is waking up. The American public has only about 6% of its total assets outside America, whereas 60–65% of all the stocks in the world are outside America. So it's only a beginning trend, not the end of a trend. However, I don't think they're too high. The emerging market shares are about in line with American share prices, not higher.
Emerging markets covers a pretty wide range these days. Which of the markets you particularly like?
Well, let's say the ones where you can get bargains or where there's been a lot of pessimism. For example, Indonesia, the market went down 50% and more. Also in Thailand, also in Korea, in Portugal, in Turkey, those markets are way down.
This is an area where virtually all individual investors probably have to do most of their investing through mutual funds, isn't it?
Oh, yes. It'd be hopeless for an individual to know which company to buy in Turkey or Portugal.
Peter, are you looking at the world, or are you still too fascinated by America?
No, there's so many great stocks here. I mean, I stay here. I mean, I do own Body Shop International, which is a British company, and I own British Petroleum, but not very much outside the U.S.
Well, John mentioned financial stocks. I remember when you said on this program once that you owned Was it 35 stocks in Fidelity Magellan that had first in their name?
Yes.
Or maybe it was more than 35?
I think I own 200 companies that were west of the Charles River that were banks. So I think the banking industry is attractive. Right in Boston, I like Shawmut Bank of Boston. I like Pam Rappo in New Jersey. I like D&N Financial out in Michigan. I think there's a lot of these companies that are very cheap, and I think they're definitely going to improve their earnings.
The conventional wisdom, which neither of you has ever been guilty of, is that with interest rates rising, it's too late to buy the financial companies. What's your response to that?
Well, actually, right now the banking system has record equity assets, and they have more investment securities than they have loans. That's the first time since the 1950s. So this is one pillar, one part of the stool that's in great shape. This is very shaky at 1990. I think the media has missed this turnaround in the banking industry. And I've never met a banker yet that wanted a recession. I don't think they like non-performing loans. They like the economy to get better. They're not rooting for this. Adding 450,000 jobs last month is a good thing for everybody.
Let's talk about the economy. John, what do you think of the American economy now?
From a long-range viewpoint, I believe the rate of progress is going to be greater in the next 20 years than any previous 20 years in history, because the two greatest worries of our lifetime have been largely removed. One was the fear of nuclear war. Up until 4 years ago, that was a major factor for everybody. The other one was the fear that the communists were right when they said they were going to dominate the earth. They had captured 23 nations. None had ever become free again up until 4 years ago. Those two great threats had a depressing influence. Now that they're gone, there's going to be more investing across international boundaries, more foreign trade, less money wasted on armaments, more spread of brotherhood and religion. The whole world is coming into a peaceful, glorious, rapidly growing period.
I was appearing on another program yesterday and was regarded as something of a Pollyanna because I rejected the idea that the next generation of Americans will live worse than the present one. I take it you share my untrendy optimism.
I would go as far as to say I believe the standard of living in America will double within 25 years, which is an enormous rate.
What are some of the reasons it will double?
Well, for example, 50% of all the scientists who ever lived are alive today. 50% of all the books published were published just in the last 60 years. 50% of all the scientific discoveries ever made were in this century.
Yeah, but the pessimists say that we're threatened by foreign competition, that our educational system is a wreck, that we're going to have too many people in retirement. That doesn't worry you?
Oh, yes, there are plenty of things to worry about. Always have been, always will be plenty of things to worry about for a person, a family, a corporation, a nation. But there are so many good things that are not publicized. For example, the number of people attending universities in America is 10 times as great as it was 100 years ago. The number of people getting doctor's degrees in America now is 10 times as great as it was just 60 years ago. Everywhere well, let's take agriculture. In 1800, 85% of the people had to live on the farms just to produce enough food. Now, with a little over 3% of Americans on the farms, we worry about surpluses, not shortages of food. This could go on and on.
Peter, I almost hesitate to ask you about the overall economy because you're always kicking the tires in individual companies. Do you make any kind of an overall appraisal?
Well, I think we've had 9 recessions since World War II. We just had number 9. We've had a slow recovery. That's not surprising. We've added 3.4 million jobs off the bottom. We lost 2 million. We've lost 500,000 manufacturing jobs. We've only added back about 10,000. But I'm impressed by our job creation in this country. I mean, the decade of the 80s, we added 18 million jobs, with the 500 largest companies eliminating 3 million. We're going to do that again this decade. Not quite as fast because not many people entering the workforce. So it's quite a machine.
The cynics say, oh, yes, but they're all hamburger flippers at McDonald's. That wasn't accurate, was it?
No, there was 2.1 million businesses started in the 80s. If they just had 10 employees each, that's 21 million jobs. I mean, I think they're wrong. They continue to be wrong. And I think this capitalist trend that we've had that's spreading, productivity is improving. There is a hitch that America used to work right for about 90% of Americans. It's now working maybe for 65. A lot of people in the inner city, a lot of people in the rural country. We need to do this retraining of America. It's very important.
John mentioned a revival of religion. I know that interests you, but it also interests you that you're working in the inner city in Boston. You're very concerned there. Tell us what your ideas are. How are we going to get to those 35%?
Well, you have to stop this high school dropout rate, which is approaching 50% in every major city. There's lots of scholarships available to people if they make it through high school, but they're gone if they drop out in 8th or 9th grade. We have to keep open the branches of the public libraries. Those are very important. Have to do Big Brother, Big Sister. We have to do more of the boys' clubs and girls' clubs. These are wonderful things that keep people interested. They need to just keep away from despair. And we have to get jobs into the inner city. We have to get factories in there.
Returning to this nervous financial market situation, John, are you concerned that inflation is roaring back in America? I know you always keep an eye on it.
Yes, I am. That is one of the many worries if you want to find things to worry about. There will be bear markets. I would say that there's likely to be 2 major bear markets every 12 years in almost every major nation, including America. But on top of that, there is a long-term trend toward inflation. Now, that too will go in cycles. Sometimes there'll be good years with maybe 1% inflation, other times bad years in America with 15% inflation. But if it averages out to 6% a year, that'll double your cost of living every 12 years, and in 40 years it'll cost you 10 times as much to live as now.
Neither you nor Peter spent a lot of time worrying about market forecasts. Does this market, which you said still looked a little rich to you, look like one that can go up over the next couple of years, or don't you worry about that?
It will go up, but I don't know when it will go up. My analysis is that sometime before the end of 2000, there's a better than even chance the Dow will go above 6,000.
And that'll be either good or bad depending on how much inflation we have between now and then.
Yes.
Peter, how does it look to you, this market overall?
Well, I think Johnson & Johnson's going to double their earnings in the next 6 years. I think the stock will double. I mean, that's
whatever
the way
happens to the stock market, whatever happens to the economy.
I think profits will be good the next few years, and I think the stock market will do well. There is a fear that inflation heats up. That's a fear we'll find out in a couple of years.
What would you avoid?
Well, I think the electric utility industry is definitely in for a competition. It's not the same industry it was. They're being hurt on all fronts. It's not growing. They can't cut costs. I'd rather own telephone utilities like NYNEX or Southwestern Bell.
Thank you both for some wise words at a moment of high nerves in the market. Thanks, Peter Lynch. Thanks, John Templeton.